Welcome makers! I'm Catherine Harris with Stitchery, and if you're new here, I do sewing and DIY related videos each week, so consider subscribing so you can catch more. This week I wanted to do a sew along as well as a pattern review for the Style Arc Parker Ponte pants. Now these are an elasticated waist pant, which means no fly, no zip, super comfortable. And I decided to make them in a stretch faux suede, which I got from Minerva, and I will leave a link to the pattern as well as the fabric down below. I'm going to start off with a sew along so you know how to make it, and then stay tuned till the end because I will talk a little bit about my pattern review, what I liked and didn't like. So let's get to stitching. Bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum. So we're going to start with the waistband. So with your fabric pieces right sides together along the short edge, which has the notch which marks the center of that waistband, we are just going to pin it. And then we're going to stitch down that short end just with a regular sewing machine. So I didn't use a serger because I want to be able to press this flat so it lies a little nicer. So once the seams are pressed open and flat, you're going to take your elastic in the size that measures your waist, and you are going to attach it together so it forms a tube. Now with that tube, you are going to find the half points, which I am marking right here, and then you are going to quarter it by finding those quarter points, which I am marking right here on either end. And the seam that we had just sewn the waistband together, that marks one of the half points as well. So now that the band is quartered, we are going to attach it. Now you can see that where the center of the waistband is where we're going to line up where our elastic is. So in order to do that, I am just lightly pressing to create a nice line where I can follow to place the elastic on the waistband. So with that, I am just marking on here, and I am marking on the wrong side because that's the side that we're going to be attaching the elastic to. The right sides of the fabric is what's going to show. So I'm just marking where my quarter marks are, and then just a T to mark the top of the T will mark where that line is going to sit, so I know exactly where I'm going to place it. So then I'm going to take my elastic and I'm going to match it up along that center line here, which I had just folded, as well as pinning on all of the quarter marks. So you will have some fabric sticking out at the bottom that will accommodate our seam allowance when we attach the waistband to the pants. So next I am attaching it at the next quarter mark, and then you will have to do just a slight bit of stretching in between those quarter marks, and I'm just putting a pin in between that just to kind of hold that. But if you're confident with your stretching at the machine, then you don't need to add that pin. Now when you are sewing this, you want to ensure that you are not stretching the bottom fabric and you're only stretching the waistband. And so you can zigzag this on, or in my case, I am using my cover stitch machine to attach it. And you want to make sure that it is a stretch stitch because this is going to be very stretchy. And this is what it will look like when it's all done and we fold the two raw edges together. And then we're going to baste that in place. So I just basted it in place with a regular stretch stitch. Now onto the crotch seam. So with the crotch seam, you are going to match up a front and a back piece on your crotch seam. And this will form the inseam. And you're just going to pin all the way down the inseam on these two pieces and ensure that the right sides are together as always. And you are going to stitch this with a stretch stitch, or you can use a serger, which is what I decided to use. So once that is done, you're going to repeat that to the other side, and you'll notice that you have 2 notches for the back and 1 notch for the front. Next, we are going to match up these crotch seams, And you're going to match the fronts with the fronts and the backs with the backs. And make sure that you nest those seams. So you can see I've got one seam pointed in one direction and one seam pointed in the opposite direction. This will help to ensure that that crotch area lays flat and reduces some of that bulk. And then you're just going to match up those notches both on the front and back pieces and continue to pin. And then you're just going to pop that over to your serger or your sewing machine, and you're going to stitch that also using a stretch stitch. And that's what it will look like when it is all done. And you can see that it nests quite nicely. So I am just turning these right side out because now we are going to do the back pockets, which is missing from the instructions. So this is a finished version of the pants, but you should do them right now when the side seams are not done up. So you're going to take the pocket piece and you are going to fold the top down. And I just used my cover stitch to stitch this in place, but you could use your regular sewing machine. Then you're going to fold in the corners of the pocket, and you want to fold these in the exact same width on all sides as well as for both pockets, or if you're just doing one pocket, then you just have the one. Next, once that is all pressed in place, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to attach it to the back of your pants. So you're going to find a place that you think looks quite nice on you, and then you're just going to pin that in place, and you want to be careful that you're only pinning the fabric. And in my case, I've got the 2 layers, so I actually put a clear ruler underneath, so when I'm pinning, I am not going to catch any of the other fabric. So you're going to use a decent amount of pins to ensure that your pocket is straight, and then you're just going to top stitch along the edge, and your pocket's done. Now for the faux inseam pockets. So with these, you're going to take your front pocket pieces and you are going to match up the notches here. So it will hang over just slightly at the top and the bottom, and that is to accommodate for the seam allowance so that everything goes nicely. So don't worry if that pocket piece is hanging over the edge. That is exactly how it's meant to be drafted. So you're going to stitch that in place, and I used a regular sewing machine as opposed to a serger because I wanted to reduce the bulk, and reducing some of that thread reduces the bulk here. We're going to push the seam allowance to the pocket facing side, and then I am going to top stitch this, and I used my cover stitch for that. Now onto the side seams. So we are just going to match our front and back together at the side seams, also matching up the notches, and it just so happens that the notch on the front matches to where the pocket facing joins the pants, which makes it nice and easy. So we're going to pin all the way down the leg side seam here, and then you're going to pop on over to your sewing machine and serger and stitch that up in a stretch stitch. And so just stitch it all the way down, and your pants should look like this. And they're really starting to look like pants now. Now we're going to attach the waistband. So when we attach the waistband, we are going to place right sides together, and we are going to match up the quarter seams. So the quarter seams are going to match at our center front and center back, as well as our 2 side seams. So that is why you want to make sure that you're very accurate when doing the band. And just so you know, the side that we had stitched the elastic on is the inside, but if you wanted a decorative cover stitch detail on the front of it, you could flip that around if you wanted. And I am just matching this up and using a decent amount of pins so that when I get over to my serger, things go nice and smoothly. And then we're just going to stitch that all in. And once that is stitched in place, we can turn our pants right side out. And this is what it will look like from the top. And then we are going to move on to the hem and the cuffs. So there are a couple of marks that you want to be aware of where you had notched at the very top marking. That is where we are going to pin our cuffs. And so we're going to pin it up to that top point. And I'm just pinning it at the side seams first, which is where it's going to match on the side notches here. And do be sure to try on your pants just to make sure that they are the right length that you would like them. And now that it's pinned, I am going to top stitch this either with a twin needle or in my case a cover stitch. And then we are going to cuff them. So we're just going to roll it up and it folds right in half again, which is where that other notch is. And I'm just pinning at the side seams first.
And then once we have that pinned, we're going to go over to the machine and just stitch down that seam to hold everything in place. And this is what our finished pants will look like. How cute are they?
Okay, so now that we have that all stitched up and you know how to make it, I thought I would talk to you a little bit about the pattern and some of the changes that I made to the pattern. So the first thing that I decided to make after I looked at the pattern pieces was to narrow in the straight leg by 1/2 inch just on the pattern pieces. So I actually took away 1 inch at the bottom of the hem. Now I do like the fact that it's a straight leg and it's not completely tight and form-fitting like leggings are, but it was just a little too wide for my taste, so I decided to shorten that up a bit. Now, since we're talking about hems, I thought I would mention the bottom cuff on the pant leg. Now, it does have a double rolled hem where you roll it, you hem it, and then you roll it back over itself to create a nice cuffed look. And it goes slightly above the ankle, which I think is really on trend right now. And I really like pairing with loafers or even some cute sneakers. And next, I wanted to mention a couple of details about the pattern itself. So it's actually drafted quite well, all the notches match up perfectly, and it seems to fit nicely. Now, I did decide to size down one size rather than based on my measurements, just because when I originally did up my muslin, it was a bit too bulky in the thighs and the butt area, and when I sized down, it fit perfectly. So just depending on your body shape, and these pants might be styled to fit a little bit more baggy, but I like it a little bit tighter fitting in and around my hips and my bottom, and then going into that straighter leg, going down the bottom to that cuff, which I think looks a little bit more flattering on my body type. Now it is set with fake slash pockets in the front. Now you can add a pocket bag if you wanted. My material is thin and it's kind of form-fitting to my body. I would be putting anything in those pockets. You would see it and it would look lumpy and bumpy and just not flattering. So I decided to keep it as a faux slash pocket, which I think is a really nice detail to that because it adds some nice elements to it as opposed to being just a plain elasticated waist pant. Now in the back, there are patch pockets to place on the back. But if you followed my sew along, you will already know that in the instructions, there is nowhere to place those patch pockets on, and they don't even go into detail on how to do that. Now, I know exactly how to do it, and I know you should do it at the very beginning. That being said, I wanted to follow the instructions exactly according to you, and also I happened to cut the pieces out, leave it for a couple weeks, and then I stitched it and completely forgot that there were back pockets that I needed to add on at the very beginning. Now, in terms of the instructions, if you can read them, they are microscopic. They are not the greatest. So one of them, it has that you are going to match up the front and the back pieces to create the inseam. Now, if you're new to sewing, you might not really know how to match those pieces up. And if you look at the diagram looks like you're matching up a front and a front piece. When in reality, to create that inseam, you need to match a front and a back piece together. So it should read to match a front to the back piece and repeat for both sides, but it doesn't actually say that. So the wording is confusing and the diagram is confusing. And it is very sparse in terms of directions. So if you're going to invest in any of these patterns, I would probably suggest that you be an intermediate to advanced sewer, even though they're very basic patterns to sew, that you need to have an understanding of how garments come together because the instructions are not the greatest. That being said, I think that it is a very comfortable pant. They fit quite nicely and it's super quick to make. So if you are an adventurous beginner, you can most certainly do it, but just make sure that if you have any trouble, maybe Googling or YouTubing some tutorials on how to make some of those articles might help you out, just because it's not necessarily as clear in the pattern instructions. Other than that, that would be all I really had. Overall, it's a great pattern. It's drafted nicely. I would consider making a couple more of these, maybe in some darker colors as well. I was a wee bit concerned because blush pink is my favorite color, but I was worried that the pants might look like naked pants because it's so close to my current skin tone. Let me know what you think. Should I dye them with some Rit dye and make them just a wee bit darker, or are you digging the blush pink? Let me know in the comments down below. Until next time, makers, let's get our sewspiration on.